Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're opening the door to one of the most intense and visual confrontations in all of prophetic literature.
It's a really high-stakes scene.
It is. We're diving into a heavenly courtroom drama where the legal maneuvering is immediate, the stakes are, well, national survival, and the judgment shapes everything that comes after.
Both historically and theologically.
And this isn't just, a historical report. This vision is a kind of spiritual shortcut. It explains exactly how divine justice and divine mercy intersect when God's people are at their absolute weakest point.
Right, when they seem to have nothing going for them.
We're focused exclusively on Zechariah chapter 3 today, and we'll be examining the sources you shared with us, really going almost verse by verse. Okay, let's unpack this. Our mission is to pull out the core meaning, nail down the historical tension of that moment, and reveal the really profound prophetic symbols that are just packed into this one incredible chapter.
And setting that stage is absolutely essential.
It is.
Because without the context, the drama it loses its weight. So we're situated squarely in the post-Babylonian exile period. Think roughly 520 BC.
So the remnant is back in Jerusalem.
A tiny fraction of them, yes. A remnant had returned. And you have to understand, they were profoundly weak, economically devastated, spiritually just, discouraged. And they were facing massive opposition from all the surrounding nations.
So they had these two monumental tasks ahead of them. The first, and this is what the prophets Haggai and Zechariah were pushing for, was the physical rebuilding of the temple.
All right, the structural part.
But the second task, which is really the focus of this vision, was the restoration of legitimate spiritual leadership. They needed a functional, sanctified priesthood.
Precisely. And that brings us immediately to our central figure, Joshua, the high priest.
The man at the center of it all.
He is the man standing there as the symbolic representative of this entire fragile, recovering nation. He's supposed to be the pillar of spiritual authority, but here he is, standing in a celestial court. And the evidence against him, and by extension, the whole nation, is just overwhelming.
So let's get into the first verse. It immediately just plunges us right into the scene. This is Zechariah's fourth major vision.
Right.
And he showed me Joshua the high priest standing before the angel of the Lord, and Satan standing at his right hand to resist him.
It's the ultimate spiritual conflict, and it's played out in a judicial setting. You have three essential dynamic characters right there in one sentence.
Let's break them down.
Let's start with Joshua. As you said, he's more than just an individual. He is the personification of the entire nation of Israel in its compromised, recovering, and, well, its impure state.
So his personal problem is the nation's problem.
His predicament symbolizes the urgent need for national and spiritual restoration after decades of, covenant failure and this punitive captivity.
And his own personal history just adds layers of tragedy and significance to his role here. I mean, he's not just a high priest.
No.
He's the high priest who is literally reviving a dead office.
That's a great way to put it. The historical context here, which the Cambridge Notes details so well, is vital. His grandfather, Zechariah, he was a victim of Nebuchadnezzar's brutal conquest. He was slain at Riblah after Jerusalem and the temple were just utterly destroyed.
And his father.
His father, Josedek, was taken captive to Babylon, so Joshua was likely born in exile. And for 52 long years, during the captivity with the city in ruins, the high priesthood was in total abeyance. It was dormant. It was profoundly dishonored.
So Joshua steps back onto the stage as the first high priest of this whole post-captivity era. He's reviving the central mechanism of atonement and worship for a nation that has, failed spectacularly.
Which brings us to the second figure, the one standing at his right hand.
Satan, the adversary.
Exactly. The Hebrew word Satan literally means the adversary or the accuser, and his placement is crucial. Standing at the right hand of the accused, that signifies the exact position of the prosecutor in a court of law. We see it in other places, like Psalm 109.
So he's not just, lurking in the shadows.
No, no.
He is performing a specific legal function. He's the prosecuting attorney.
Absolutely. Satan is there to resist, to prosecute, and to really aggregate or even exaggerate the faults of Joshua, who again represents the entire Jewish nation.
And the goal of this prosecution?
The goal is to leverage those spiritual and national failures to prevail with God. He's arguing that the Jews are unworthy of restoration, that they should remain under the power of their human adversaries, and that the temple and the renewed priesthood, the very work God commanded them to do, should just stop.
Wow. That makes the stakes feel incredibly high.
Yeah.
The opposition is basically arguing that their past failure nullifies God's future plan.
And we should acknowledge, the alternative interpretation that's offered in the sources.
The one from blame.
Yes. This view suggests that Satan here could refer metaphorically to the very human adversaries of the Jews, the actual political enemies, like Sanballat, who are actively and strenuously opposing the rebuilding of the temple on the ground.
That's a fascinating nuance. So it could be the spiritual accuser or the human agents of that accusation.
Right, but either way, the theological function is the same: to block God's work by highlighting the impurity, the perceived lack of merit in the people who are trying to do it.
Okay, so that's the prosecution.
Yeah.
And then there's the third figure.
The mediator of this whole charge drama, the angel of the Lord.
And what does he represent?
He signifies divine mercy, intercession, and most importantly, the sovereign authority to overrule these accusations, no matter how much merit they might have.
So we have the accusation laid out, the defense, Joshua looking pretty vulnerable, and the prosecutor is ready to argue his case.
Right.
But before the legal argument can even really begin, we get the divine defense in verse 2, and it's delivered by the angel of the Lord. And the Lord said unto Satan, The Lord rebuke thee, O Satan, even the Lord that hath chosen Jerusalem rebuke thee.
This is the highest authority just shutting down the prosecution immediately and definitively.
There's no debate.
There's no debate on the facts of Joshua's impurity. The vision itself is about to confirm that in the very next verse. But the Lord refuses to even let Satan proceed with the charges. The divine intercession is preemptive, and it's absolute.
And the foundation of that defense isn't Joshua's innocence. It's something much more powerful.
It's God's sovereign choice.
Right. The rebuke is anchored in what the sources call electing love. It says, even the Lord that has chosen Jerusalem rebuke thee.
This is a monumental point for that little remnant. It highlights that the entire restoration effort, reviving the priesthood, returning to the land, it's based entirely on God's prior covenant, on his unconditional sovereign choice.
It's not about them.
It shifts the focus completely away from the failed merits of the accused people and puts it entirely onto the unwavering commitment of the divine judge.
So if you're one of those discouraged Jewish returnees, listening to Zechariah tell this vision, what does that phrase, electing love, mean to you specifically? You've been decimated, you're small, you failed the covenant.
It means your survival was not an accident. It was a divine intervention rooted in history. It meant that despite the temple being burned and the leadership being killed or scattered, God had fixed his choice on Jerusalem, and that choice was non-negotiable.
It gives them a reason to keep going.
It provides theological assurance. It tells them their struggle to rebuild wasn't just, political luck. It was the inevitable completion of a divine promise. It gives legitimacy even to their weakness and their failure.
And this emphasis on preservation is immediately followed by that incredibly vivid metaphor.
A visceral one.
Is not this a brand plucked out of the fire?
This image is just unforgettable. A brand is defined as a piece of burning or smoldering wood snatched from the flames.
So the fire is the judgment of the captivity itself.
Exactly. The Benson commentary emphasizes that this tiny group, this small remnant returned from captivity, represented by Joshua, has been miraculously rescued from utter destruction, like a piece of wood snatched from an all-consuming fire.
And the Jameson Fawcett Brown commentary points out the implication here.
It does. It says God does recognize their sin. The state of the high priest confirms it, but God already subjected them to 70 years of severe punishment. So having disciplined them, he then delivered them based on this electing love.
So the profound implication is that the process of deliverance, once God starts it, it can't be aborted by the accuser.
Precisely. If God starts a deliverance, he will complete it. The sources even connect this forward to the New Testament, like Philippians 1:6, assuring that completion. They have been through the fire, they are rescued, and God intends to keep that rescue intact.
So the accuser's charges are basically nullified.
They're nullified because the object of the charges is already under divine ownership and protection.
So the defense team, the angel of the Lord, doesn't argue that Joshua is pure.
Not at all.
They just assert ownership and declare that the brand has already been retrieved from the flames. But that sets up a necessary tension. If they're already saved from the fire, why do they still need to be cleansed?
And that is the critical question. The divine decree in verse 2, it handles the judicial pardon, the legal status before the court.
But not the practical reality.
But the vision immediately transitions to the functional reality, the need for practical purity and sanctification, which the next few verses have to address. Right? That tension, the difference between a judicial pardon and functional purity, it starts getting resolved right in verse 3. Despite the Lord's rebuke of Satan, the vision confirms the initial basis of the accusation.
The evidence.
We read, "Now Joshua was clothed with filthy garments and stood before the angel." This image is the visible evidence of the indictment. It's not some arbitrary detail, it's the spiritual reality of the accused made manifest.
This must have been a moment of just profound shame for the high priest. I mean, he should be wearing clothes specifically designed for holiness and ritual purity.
Absolutely. And the filth of these garments symbolizes two essential concepts that are really intertwined. First, you have Joshua as the natural man, imperfect, flawed, sinful, like any human priest.
Okay.
But second, and far more critical in this national vision, they represent the collective sin and covenant unfaithfulness of Israel, the failures that led to the exile and the impurity that's still clinging to them because of it.
And this image of a sinful state being compared to clothing,
Yeah.
it has a really powerful and kind of terrifying cross-reference in the sources.
It links directly to Isaiah 64.6.
Yeah.
Where the prophet cries out, recognizing humanity's total failure. But we are all as an unclean thing, and all our righteousnesses are as filthy rags.
And we all do fade as a leaf, and our iniquities, like the wind, have taken us away.
That cross-reference just highlights the futility of human effort. Even our best deeds, our own righteousnesses, are essentially worthless, like soiled clothing before a perfectly holy God.
Yeah, and think about the weight of this for the high priest. He's the one who's supposed to mediate holiness between God and man. He wears the names of the tribes on his breastplate.
And yet he himself is standing there, objectively, in a state of filth and unrighteousness. He's confirming the very charge that Satan was about to bring. The failure is systemic.
Which leads us to a really crucial insight for you, the listener. The Lord chooses to use us in our imperfection, not, after we somehow achieve perfection on our own.
That's right.
Joshua, the spiritual leader, is wearing filthy rags, yet he's still standing before the angel. He's not cast out.
It's a profound testament to divine patience. Our imperfection is not a barrier to him engaging with us or furthering his work. The work of restoration begins right in the middle of our recognized spiritual failure.
We weren't expected to clean the rags ourselves before we approach him.
Which would be impossible based on that Isaiah reference.
Right. If our righteousness is of the rags, we have nothing pure to put on.
Exactly. The required change has to be an outside intervention. And since human effort is futile, the divine mercy is immediate and declarative in verse 4.
Okay.
The angel issues the decree of cleansing, and he addresses those standing ready to serve. And he answered and spake unto those that stood before him, saying, Take away the filthy garments from him.
So that instruction is to the other angels.
Yeah.
But the declaration of forgiveness is personal. It's direct to Joshua.
It's a profound, life-altering moment. The angel continues, speaking directly to Joshua. Behold, I have caused thine iniquity to pass from thee, and I will clothe thee with change of raiment.
The sin is removed.
And the status is instantly changed. He moves from being symbolically indictable to being symbolically clean and ready for service.
Let's slow down and just explore the theological weight of that phrase, change of raiment.
Yeah.
This act of cleansing carries slightly different but complementary weight in the main doctrinal views.
For sure. From the Jewish perspective, cleansing Joshua, the representative, is symbolic of God's ultimate cleansing of the entire nation of Israel's sins, their covenant failures.
So it's a national pardon.
It's a national pardon, and it's essential for rebuilding the covenant community. It gives hope to the remnant that their communal failure isn't permanent.
Now, if we look at it from the Christian understanding, the scope broadens out.
The Christian interpretation sees the filthy garments symbolizing universal human sinfulness, and the immediate non-meritorious removal, just done by divine decree and grace. Well, that represents God's forgiveness and cleansing, replacing that sinfulness with a new status.
So it's a visual demonstration of what theology calls imputed righteousness.
Yes, the replacement of our sinfulness with a divine status of acceptability. And when you look at it through that lens, the speed of the removal is crucial. It's not a slow purification process.
It's a swap.
It's an immediate declarative exchange. It has to be immediate because the sinfulness, the filthy garments, are an absolute barrier to functioning in the presence of God. The removal shows that the solution to human sin is outside of humanity.
The angel doesn't tell Joshua to go wash his clothes or try harder.
No. The angel decrees the change, and that divine grace allows the work of restoration to proceed, even though the people, by their nature, remain imperfect.
But the process isn't finished with just clean clothes. There's a very specific, crucial addition in the next verse.
Yes, there is.
Verse 5 is fascinating because the prophet himself, Zechariah, he actually steps into the vision and intercedes.
He participates.
He says, and I said, let them set a fair mitre upon his head. So they set a fair mitre upon his head and clothed him with garments. And the angel of the Lord stood by.
The sources, specifically Barnes' notes, highlight how important this intercession is. The command to place the mitre seems to have been purposely omitted in the angel's initial decree. It was reserved for the prophet's request.
Why?
It represents man co-working with God to complete the restoration. The human element asks for the completion of all necessary things. The angel cleans the person, but the prophet asks to restore the office's full glory. Exactly. And the significance of the mitre is immense. It is the ultimate symbol of the high priesthood, the glory and complement of his entire attire.
And we know from Exodus 28 that this mitre contained the holy crown, which included that plate of pure gold,
Engraved with the crucial words, holiness to the Lord.
Okay, so why is that plate, that inscription, the key difference between just having clean clothes and having a fully restored office?
It's the functional distinction. The plate was crucial because it allowed the high priest to bear the iniquity of the holy things.
What does that mean?
It means the people were imperfect, their offerings were imperfect, even the priest himself was imperfect. But the mitre, engraved with perfect holiness, ensured that despite all that human error and flaw, the holy gifts and sacrifices of the people would be accepted before the Lord. It mediated imperfection.
So the sequence is absolutely critical. First, the removal of the filthy garments cleansed Joshua's person. That's the pardon for his sin.
Right.
But then, placing the fair mitre restored the office to its full, holy, functioning glory. It enabled him to mediate for the nation once more.
The restoration is complete and sanctified, not just in appearance, but in function. And the final line of the section confirms this. And the angel of the Lord stood by.
The divine presence validates it.
It confirms and validates this completed act of spiritual renewal. It's a stamp of approval, marking the priesthood as ready for renewed service, which sets us up perfectly for the next phase.
The conditional charge. The question shifts from, can he be clean, to how must he now live and serve?
Exactly. The narrative momentum now pivots from God's declarative grace to the solemn responsibility that follows that restoration. In verses 6 and 7, we find the terms of this renewed office.
The conditions of service.
Verse 6 says, and the angel of the Lord protested unto Joshua, saying, and we should clarify, protested here doesn't mean objection.
No, it's a legal term.
It means the angel solemnly declared the conditions. He's laying out the contract, so to speak. And this declaration of conditionality is extremely important. Joshua has been cleaned by grace, but his subsequent actions, the administration of the priesthood, it's not guaranteed forever. It's dependent on strict adherence to these mandates.
So grace cleanses, but faithfulness is required for continuity.
That's it, exactly.
And the conditions are pretty straightforward. They form the bedrock of covenant responsibility. Joshua must, 1, walk in my ways.
Which is his personal conduct, his moral and spiritual life, his fidelity to God's law.
And 2, keep my charge.
Which means to uphold and properly administer all the complex duties and ordinances of the high priestly office itself. The job description.
And if he fulfills these 2 absolute conditions, the rewards outlined in verse 7 are just. They elevate his status dramatically.
They do. He receives 3 monumental promises. First, he will judge my house.
Which gives him administrative authority over the revived temple and all its internal affairs.
Right. And second, he will keep my courts, ensuring the spiritual purity and proper function of worship within the sacred areas.
And the third reward, I find this one the most compelling. It's almost ethereal. He will receive places to walk among these that stand by.
This is a remarkable promise. It grants him unprecedented spiritual access. These that stand by are the angels and divine messengers who are just witnessing his cleansing.
So he gets to walk among them.
This promise signifies intimacy, fellowship, in communion with the spiritual realm and the divine presence itself. It is the ultimate reward for service.
So he's not just serving for God anymore.
Yeah.
He's granted the privilege of walking with God's messengers. He moves from being the disgraced representative of a failed nation to being a trusted companion among the spiritual elite.
This whole section is such a powerful model. Grace provides the purity needed for function, and faithfulness grants access and intimacy.
Okay, so with the high priest's duties established, the angel immediately pivots to this great prophetic vision in verse 8. And it's directed toward Joshua and his fellows that sit before thee. He calls them men wondered at.
That phrase, men wondered at, is the key to this transition. It means men of sign or omen.
A sign of what?
Their current imperfect reality, a restored high priest and his fellow priests in this struggling, modest sanctuary, is itself a sign pointing toward a future greater fulfillment. They are types or shadows pointing to the ultimate perfect priest king.
They're placeholders for the prophecy that's about to be given.
Exactly, which is, "For, behold, I will bring forth my servant, the branch."
The branch. This is the centerpiece of Zechariah's messianic prophecy.
It is. This term explicitly identifies the promised Messiah, Christ, and it ties back to the foundational prophecy texts that were so central to Israel's expectation. We see it across the major prophetic sources.
Right, like in Isaiah.
Absolutely. It links to Isaiah 11, which talks about a righteous shoot or root of Jesse. It also connects to the servant passages in Isaiah, like chapter 42 and 53, which described the suffering servant of the Lord.
And in Jeremiah too.
Critically, yes. It ties directly to Jeremiah 23, which calls the coming ruler the righteous branch, who will execute judgment and righteousness in the land.
So this one figure carries a kind of duality. He's both the suffering servant and the righteous king. And the sources point out there are different perspectives on the timing of this branch.
This is where doctrinal nuance comes into play. For the Christian view, the fulfillment began with the first coming of Christ, his birth, his ministry as the servant and the perfect high priest.
But other traditions emphasize the full kingly reign.
Right. Many Jewish and certain Christian millennial views focus on the branch as the king who will reign personally on the earth during the millennium. The source material cites Elder Bruce R. McConkie on this, emphasizing Christ as the branch from the house of David who will reign as king.
So the vision reassures Joshua, this current imperfect priest, that his temporary work is actually an omen. It's pointing towards an ultimate perfect priesthood and kingship. His role is temporary. The branch is eternal. So if the branch is the person, verse 9 is, well, it's the event and the foundation.
Yeah.
And the imagery here becomes extremely dense and symbolic.
He's very concentrated.
For behold the stone that I have laid before Joshua. Upon one stone shall be 7 eyes. Behold, I will engrave the graving thereof, saith the Lord of hosts, and I will remove the iniquity of that land in one day.
This is the concentrated fulfillment of the entire chapter. We start with the stone. The identity here is unequivocal. The stone is Jesus Christ, the foundational element of God's redemptive plan.
The chief cornerstone.
The chief cornerstone, the sure, immovable foundation. We see this in Isaiah 28, Psalm 118, and then picked up in Ephesians 2, where Christ is the cornerstone that the whole spiritual building is built on.
So if the branch speaks to the lineage and the coming of the Messiah, the stone speaks to his indispensable role as the foundation of the whole restored spiritual structure.
But then we get this unique detail,
Yeah.
the 7 eyes. Upon one stone shall be 7 eyes. This is where the symbolism becomes extremely powerful, tying together concepts of wisdom, power, and omnipresence.
Let's explore the interpretations of those 7 eyes, because there are a couple of main tracks.
The Christian interpretation sees the 7 eyes as a symbol of perfect wisdom and the fullness of the Holy Spirit residing in the Messiah.
And the key cross-reference there is in Revelation.
It's Revelation 5.6. John sees the Lamb who has slain Christ, and he has 7 horns for perfect power and 7 eyes, which are explicitly identified as the 7 spirits of God sent out into all the earth. The foundation is infused with the fullness of the divine spirit.
Okay, but there's a more immediate Jewish interpretation as well.
Yes. In connection with Zechariah's immediate context, it's often related to the complete divine watchfulness over God's plan, specifically the rebuilding of the temple and Israel's restoration. And this links forward to the very next chapter, Zechariah 4.7, which mentions the 7 eyes of the Lord that run to and fro through the whole earth.
So God's omniscience.
God's omniscience and his constant supervision. So either way, the message is clear. The foundation for restoration is not only divinely appointed, but it is perfectly watched over and perfectly wise.
The foundation is stable, omniscient, and fully endowed.
Absolutely. And then the vision pivots from those symbols of foundation and wisdom to the central act of salvation, the climax of the prophecy.
This is the ultimate solution to the filthy garments problem from the beginning.
This is it. I will engrave the graving thereof, and I will remove the iniquity of that land in one day.
This is the definitive answer to that whole courtroom drama, the removal of the iniquity of the entire land, not just the priest, in a single decisive day. that points inevitably to the great day of atonement achieved by Christ.
Yeah, we have to contrast this with Joshua's time. He was an earthly high priest performing annual atonement rituals.
Which had to be repeated.
They had to be repeated because they were insufficient. The sacrifices of Joshua's era were a temporary fix, a covering. This prophecy promises a singular, definitive, decisive act that cleanses the entire national debt of sin.
One and done.
That one-day act of atonement, the self-sacrifice of the Messiah, accomplishes the ultimate cleansing. It fulfills the symbolic removal of Joshua's filthy garments on an eternal, global scale. This is the promised finality.
So the symbolic cleansing of Joshua paved the way for the immediate return to service.
Yes.
But this future event, the atonement in one day, paves the way for ultimate, perfect, and perpetual peace. And the entire chapter concludes with verse 10 depicting the glorious and secure result of this single-day perfect atonement.
A beautiful image.
In that day, saith the Lord of hosts, shall ye call every man his neighbor under the vine and under the fig tree.
This is one of the classic, most resonant biblical images of peace, prosperity, security, and tranquility. It is the perfect antithesis to the chaos, the accusation, and the existential fear that post-exilic remnant was experiencing every single day.
And it speaks to far more than just economic comfort, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. It speaks to stability and absolute security. To sit under your own vine and fig tree means full rest, safety from external enemies, guaranteed stability in your own property, and the confidence that the fruit of your labor will be yours to enjoy. It's the promised state of covenant blessing, restored and perfected.
And what's the final implication here for the scope of God's work after this atonement?
The implication is one of restored relationship and harmony. The prophecy moves from a single man being cleansed to a whole land being reconciled, where neighbors live in trust and fellowship.
The individual becomes the community.
This spiritual and temporal peace, anchored in the foundation of the cleansed land and the completed atonement, becomes the ultimate and permanent reality. The vision starts with accusation and ends with total tranquility.
That is a remarkable trajectory for one short chapter. I mean, to move from Satan resisting a struggling priest in verse 1 to every man calling his neighbor in peace in verse 10. All of it driven by the promise of the branch and the stone.
So to summarize the depth we've explored in Zechariah 3, we've really tracked a powerful narrative arc. We started with the accusation in the heavenly court, where the charge of impurity was just immediately overruled by God's electing love for Jerusalem.
Yeah, not by innocence.
Then we moved into the transformation of the priesthood itself. We witnessed that symbolic purification, the immediate removal of the filthy garments, which addressed the judicial charge,
Right.
and the restoration of the fair mitre, which ensured functional holiness.
Then we saw the establishment of that conditional charge for service, demanding faithfulness from Joshua in exchange for just unparalleled access to the divine realm. It's a powerful instruction that service follows salvation, not the other way around.
Right. And finally, the climax and that dual messianic promise, the branch as the future king and servant.
And the stone.
And the stone with the 7 eyes is the immutable foundation and the source of that one definitive single-day atonement, resulting in that ultimate universal peace.
This chapter is just a masterpiece of condensed theology. It assures you that God not only identifies impurity, those filthy garments, but actively and sovereignly intervenes to cleanse and restore, regardless of the merit of the individual or the community.
Yeah, it really is an assurance of completion.
It moves from Joshua representing a small, struggling, vulnerable remnant, a brand plucked out of the fire, to the absolute certainty of the Messianic age, where God confidently declares, I will remove the iniquity of that land in one day.
What a total transformation.
That is the scale of commitment that's revealed in this deep dive. The deliverance God started with just a handful of discouraged people, and a struggling priest will ultimately result in perfect, universal security and peace.
From the brand to the fig tree.
So what does it mean for you that the work God begins, no matter how small or damaged the starting material is, will ultimately result in that perfect state where every man sits under his vine and fig tree, free from accusation and insecurity? That is the ultimate implication for you to mull over this week. We'll see you on the next deep dive.